Hello and welcome to the Big Time Strength Podcast, featuring small school strength coaches making the big time where they're at. This week, our host, Coach Preston Peterson, brings to you a high school strength coach who is doing it big time in the high school setting. We really appreciate you guys tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this week's show.
Before we get to the show, I'd like to thank our sponsors. The first one is TeamBuildr. Thank you, TeamBuildr, for sponsoring today's episode. TeamBuildr is the leading software for high schools and colleges by providing coaches the ability to write programs online, generate over 13 reports, and even train athletes remotely for side income. Right now, if you sign up with the code BIGTIME, you'll receive a free APRE programming template, which works automatically within TeamBuildr. No more spreadsheets and workout cards to track training maxes that change day by day. You can automate your programming without outsourcing your programming with TeamBuildr. It is an awesome software. The guys at TeamBuildr have it going on. Hewitt is an awesome resource for everybody that is a high school strength and conditioning coach. There's not enough great things I can say about TeamBuildr and everything that they're doing for coaches around the nation. Our second sponsor for today's show is PowerLift. PowerLift is the leading manufacturer and distributor of heavy-duty strength training equipment for collegiate and high school athletic performance centers around the world. PowerLift brings over 20 years of experience to the strength and conditioning world, and all the products are manufactured in the state-of-the-art manufacturing facility in Jefferson, Iowa. They are proud to support all coaches making it big time where they're at, and I cannot say enough great things about these two sponsors. PowerLift in general, from my college days to where I'm at now, PowerLift has been our rack. I'm telling you guys, there is not a more durable rack out there. If you go to Northwest Missouri State, you check out the racks there. They've had them probably for close to 15, 20 years now, and they still look like they're brand new. The racks that we have within our weight room, nice, pristine. It does not show wear and tear at all. And the thing about it is when you buy PowerLift, you are getting heavy duty. This stuff is rugged and it will last. And when you're looking for training equipment that's going to be used by multiple teams, multiple student athletes every single day, it's important to have the best. So thank you to our sponsors, TeamBuildr and PowerLift. Now let's get to our show. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Big Time Strength Podcast. Today it's my pleasure to interview Coach Glee, and Coach Doug Glee is working up in Michigan, and Coach Joe Cheramonti reached out and said, hey, this is somebody that you need to have on the show. And I totally agree. Got to looking into his background, what he's doing, following a little bit on social media, that type of stuff. And I'm excited to have Coach on. And his background's pretty cool. He's life science, physical science, environmental science, science, nutrition, and PE all in his background. And that hits close to home for me. My dad, who was my strength coach, was also a science teacher too. So just a great way to get the background of we come from athletic performance, all the science behind it. Obviously the art of coaching is such a huge deal, but it's fun when you can relate the two. So excited to hear from Coach. Coach, can we open up with maybe a little bit of your background and where you're at now?
I went to Hope College in Holland, Michigan, and I played football and ran track and was always into working out, and stumbled upon a professor that got me hooked on getting my certified strength and conditioning specialist while I was there. And so I completed the test right after graduation, and then I stumbled on an internship at Eastern Michigan, and it kind of put me down a path where I started learning all the things that I should have known as an athlete that I didn't get as an athlete.
One of the things that I think is such a cool deal is, as a student athlete, having a strength coach that is educated in that way to be able to pass that on. And you've got a pretty extensive background as far as where you interned at, where you were a graduate assistant, and where you were an assistant in general, and just kind of the process of getting to where you're at as far as strength and conditioning. Can you go into that just a little bit more, and then also where you're at now?
Yeah, I was lucky. I got to intern at Eastern Michigan University with Jim Schmoose. He'd just gotten hired in, and he was kind of changing the culture, and they were more of a HIIT program where they do one set to failure, and started incorporating more dynamic movements and Olympic lift variations. And so watching him get started in this program helped me, because I've had to do that several times in my career, where you're new to the program and getting people on board and how do you deal with coaches and how you deal with players that are resistant. And, so I started off there, and then I went and got my master's at Western Michigan University, and I was a GA there for a while, and then I really didn't know what I was doing, and no one was back then. It's like 1996, and internet was not what it is now, and finding jobs was basically reading NCAA letters and just sending letters out everywhere. And I was lucky enough to get an interview at Northern Iowa and worked under Jim Kramer, and got to be a full-time assistant under him, who was also starting a program. And he took everything that I had already known up to that point to another level, and his attention to detail is definitely rubbed off on me, and probably drives my athletes crazy. The stuff that bothers me is a lot of the same things that bothered him as a coach.
Always funny to see how the mentor rubs off on their student, right? Like that's pretty cool that you still carry that into today, and like it or not, go on. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I actually say things, and I can hear Coach Kramer saying the things, and I worked for him in 1999, 2000, and it's 2019. I still hear myself saying things that he would say to athletes.
That's awesome, and maybe paying a little homage to him, right? Like he would probably like that if you call him up and say, "Hey, you know what? I've been using a little bit of what you've said in the past." So, or not. I don't know. What do you think?
He's got a pretty diverse group of coaches that have come out from under him, and they're all over the country. So he seems to like it he's at North Dakota State now, and I still can't believe nobody has snapped him up at bigger programs, but I don't know if he really wants to go to. I just think he enjoys where he's at right now.
I'm always a fan of the big time mentality, right? Making the big time right where you're at, and that's big stuff right there for him. So, Coach, how about you? What's it look like for your program? Can you give us a little bit of a rundown of what your school is like, where you're at now, and what you guys are doing maybe before school, after school, and during your school day?
Well, I've been here since 2001, and when I got here, there was really no strength and conditioning at all. It was just kind of kids would go into a weight room and do whatever they wanted. And so it was slower than I would like, but we slowly got it to the point where now it's more of a culture where it's just what people do. We have a 0-hour class. It starts at 7 a.m., and we've had 45 people in that class for, I think we're now 8-9 years running. And then we have a class every hour of the day, 0 hour, first hour, second hour, third hour, fourth hour, fifth hour, sixth, and then we have a time after school from 3 to 4:30. And so the vast majority of our athletes that take part in strength and conditioning have opportunities to do it during the day or before school. And that's huge because I'm a big proponent of the multi-sport athlete, and it's hard when I've expected my football guys to be after school and make them choose between lifting and playing basketball, and I want them playing basketball. So they're in my class during the day. They can go to basketball. There's no conflict there. And when I first got here, there was a conflict where people were making choices and not play sports to lift, and that's never my intent for what we're doing.
No doubt. Not to push everybody in this direction, but when you can get your school day, every one of your class periods filled up with an actual availability to have a strength class, that's awesome. Because exactly what you're talking about. To be able to encourage the multi-sport athlete and be able to get the lifting done within their school day. First of all, like when I talk to my student athletes, they're like, we work here, but it's a totally different type of work. And they get to relax their mind and work their body and do it in a different way. And I think that's a great thing for students so that they have more time after, maybe it's basketball practice or whatever they got going on that night. So,
and that's go ahead.
No, you got it. Go for it.
I would say, a lot of the athletes always want to do more stuff in the weight room. And I'm like, hey, we're in the weight room or running or yoga or apply whatever 5 days a week. When you're out of here, you don't need, we're doing more in a week than the college athletes are allowed to do with the number of days that I have contact with you. Go work on basketball, go work on go work on the skills that are more important. Like the weight room's important, but the transfer to your skills is more important. So if all you're doing is lifting and not working on your skills, so that's one of the biggest things I feel like we have it's an advantage for us that our kids don't have to do it after school and they can go and shoot baskets and play baseball or whatever else things they want to do.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. Minimum effective dose, you get them 5 days a week. You get to have a ton of contact hours with them. and say, this is what we find the most important. We don't have to have more than that,
No.
And that's sometimes hard to tone back a high school athlete, right?
Well, I have a few that I'm still battling with that they'll leave me and then they'll go back to the Y or another weight room and go lift for another hour or two. And I think it just gets to a level where there's a point of diminishing return and there's really not a benefit to it. And if anything, you're increasing your risk of injury.
Right. And, I'm the first one to say, I love it when people want to be in the weight room, but there's got to be a limit somewhere, right? There's got to be say, you know what, this is how we treat our body. And if you don't do it well long enough, you're going to end up being injured, like you said. So that's
and
something no, you're good.
I think the one thing that a lot of the high school, especially male athletes, because they want to all be faster and they all want to jump higher, but they've already got the lifting part taken care of in our classes, and we do quite a bit of running in my classes. But the reality is, they need to sprint more, and they need to, like, with full recovery, sprint and sprint and sprint. And don't come to the weight room more. Go do some of that stuff more with full recovery, and you'll see exponential growth in your speed if you're willing to put that time into your speed development and not just make it all about the weight room. And I think that's where track coaches and strength coaches sometimes at the high school level butt heads, is because if the weight room is only about weight, and like that, the weight room for us is a means to an end. We're not the end. I want you faster. I want you jumping better. I want you healthy. I don't want this to be the final product of our ultimate goal.
So true, man. That is I would say if strength coaches could just see that as a role, that we are not the end goal, that we are just part of the puzzle that helps so many people out. Because truthfully, like, if it doesn't carry over to skill, like what you've talked about, if it doesn't carry over to skill, or if we aren't getting athletes truly faster, like there's not going to be as much carryover as we seem to think as a strength coach. So I think when you talk about a whole athlete, that's where it's got to be. So I think you're right on the right track with all that stuff, Coach.
And when people talk about buy-in from coaches and buy-in from players, I always tell people we sell results. So our athletes see the results. We do a lot of testing, whether it be with GymAware or whether it's laser timers, and they know their power output's going up. They know they're getting faster. And when they see that and their coaches can see that, there's buy-in from that, other than them just taking our word for it and making it all about maxes on squat and maxes on bench and maxes on power clean. And we do all that, but again, that's a means to get to the other stuff.
Mm-hmm. So, Coach, if you could describe kind of your training philosophy or some of your programming methodologies, what would you say that's like? How would you describe that?
I always, because the whole, do you train muscles, you train movements? I'm like, we train our muscles through the movements. We don't do a lot of isolation stuff. We have limited time. I have an hour a day with these kids. And so we do very few like single joint movements. We do Olympic lift variations or derivatives. We do full Olympic lifts. I'm a little different with that. I don't make anybody do the full movement. So if you want to just do a clean pull thigh or clean pull floor, if you're doing some form of triple extension, that's good. But a lot of our athletes, I have some of them since 6th or 7th grade that have been working with me, and they get tired of just doing the basic pull after a while. And so when they're ready, if they say they want to learn it and they can show me that they're proficient in a basic pull, for me, sometimes that's 4, 5, 6 months before I even let them think about worrying about a catch. So that's the base of our foundation. We do what we're basic old school squat. We do the Olympic variations. We do RDL, so we're hinging, we're single leg movements. We do all the basic powerlifting movements. But years ago, I was at a conference in Chicago with Hammer Strength, and I think it was one of the coaches. I can't remember his name now, from University of Missouri, Dr. Pat Ivy. Yeah, and he said it was a round table, and it was a really small conference and great speakers. And one of the high school coaches was like, "What can we do to help our athletes get ready for you?" And he said, de-emphasize bench. And then everybody on the board agreed, because high school kids are so bench dominant. I still fight it with our kids. They'll get more excited for bench than anything else we do, and it has the least impact on them in a performance standpoint. And so getting them to understand that the other stuff is, that's where the money's made, is are you explosive in the lower half? Can you transfer it to other movements? Do you have strong legs? And then again, like, not the bench isn't an important thing for us. I always tell people, we've had kids bench 365 in high school, but that doesn't make them a very good athlete if the other stuff isn't there.
No doubt. There is no doubt behind that. I mean, it's like just like any weight room numbers, right? If all the other stuff is not behind it, weight room numbers aren't that impressive. It's when you can actually transfer it to the field, court, mat, track, whatever you're doing. That's where it's at.
And the big thing that we have a part, because we're 5 days, and like we run 2 days a week. So whether we're doing tag variety games, whether we're doing flying tens, where we're measuring it, we're sprinting. We do lots of full recovery or partial recovery. I tend not to be like the big battle going all over in the high school is because everybody wants to be the tough guy and like run kids into the ground, and like it's like I've said, there's a point of diminishing return where you're not actually improving what you think you're improving. And I think if those coaches that want the old school run them till they puke type stuff, I'm like, if they'd actually measure what they're doing and see if their kids are improving, I would put our improvement against their improvement. And it's not that we're not working hard, and our kids get tired, and but it's how you do it and appropriate rest and recovery, and not just making yourself feel good because the kids are tired. Like everybody says it, like it's easy to make people tired. It's harder to develop them, and there's a fine line between tired and overtraining.
Oh, no doubt. And not to jump on a feed the cat's wagon, because I believe in a ton of what Tony Holler type of stuff is talking about. I think he's speaking in Iowa actually tomorrow. But he brings up, like, don't burn the steak. Don't let today's training ruin tomorrow's training. And there's so much truth to that, because if we're so dead tired or our legs are so dang sore that we can't move the next day, then we're wasting days at that point. We're wasting time.
And I really try to sell it. And I preach it to our kids all the time. If you're not, specifically speaking about speed, if you're not training at 90 to 95% of your fastest times, you're not really training speed. And that everybody's different. So my 90% could be very different than yours. I might look like I'm jogging and still my 90%, where my fastest kid, he's got to be moving faster. And so that concept of their personal effort to get to that 90, 95%, and you can't get into that 90, 95% range if you're tired and without proper recovery. And so there's a time and place for conditioning, and I think there could be a little more debate about that. But when you're talking speed development, that concept of you have to give near full recovery and be willing to be patient with that recovery to truly work on speed. And I think I'm not 100% agreement with everything Tony Holler says, but that concept that he's selling is transforming other programs all over the country.
No doubt. I hear it from Michael Boyle talking a lot about it too. Like it's starting to streamline into the strength and conditioning world. And like I'm in agreement. I don't agree with everything that Tony says, but man, he's hitting the nail on the head on a lot of different aspects. And the thing that is really cool for me is we started to implement some of that. Like we've always done sprints. We've always done a longer recovery where we talk about form and stuff in between. But now we've started to measure and test. And you talked about laser timers earlier. Like when we actually measure, kids get after it. I mean, like that 90, 95% is so easy to hit when they are actually being timed.
And you see it, like whenever I break out the timer, the effort, like, and it's like I started breaking it out more because I'm like the effort, and I fiddle around like so. Years ago I was reading stuff by Brian Mann and about how his research about vertical jump and his power clean transfer and his studies of things aren't moving. So I started going down that like I'm reading it and I'm like I was always at smaller schools that didn't have a budget for that, so. Like I always wanted to be at a school that had Tendo units, and like I never got to one of those schools, and so I started reading more about it, and I had some really, really strong kids, like excessively strong kids to the point I'd say probably point of diminishing return strong, and so I started reading that, and I went down the rabbit hole, and I had some extra money, and I bought a gym wear, and I had it it showed up at Christmas time, and I have little kids, and I think at the time they were 8 and 6, and I have an 11-pound bar, and so we start playing with it, and it's been universal. Anything I measure, the effort's better. So they already knew how to do clean pull thighs, so we started measuring it, and the two of them, the effort went through when they could see the feedback on that. When we do flying tens, when there's the effort there. When we do our RFD squats, and I give Jim Aware or a push band or bar sensei on the bar, the effort, like everything grows when they get the feedback. And I think in the academic world, in our schools, if you want to not call what we do academic, but they know that, like, when kids get feedback, they do better in their classes. And so it's no different with us. And the cool thing is ours can be immediate, and the technology prices have come down so much that if we can give the feedback, it's amazing to watch. And we just did it today where I had some push bands and a bar sensei on the platforms with power clean, and then I had on squat. I had the gym wears over there on squat, and I don't have enough for everybody, but you'd watch the people that had the feedback. Their intensity was definitely peaked compared to those that don't. And some of them that use it, once they use it and they get that feeling, they don't always need. They don't need to use the feedback all the time, but until you feel what that intensity truly looks like, it's kind of transformed what we've done. And for us to raise the money to buy those things, our athletes take pride in it, and I think they buy in because they see whether we're measuring the power output on jump squats. Well, they can see that what we're doing is improving, or sometimes they see that they aren't improving, and then we have questions about what's going on. Are you overtraining? Are you not sleeping? Are you not eating? And so, okay, all the feedback. We do really basic things, but we measure them in really fancy ways, if that makes sense. I'm not recreating any wheels. There's people much smarter than me that have done all this stuff. All we do is measure it, and then that way the athletes can see that they're growing.
That's great. I think the coolest thing for us this semester, we were lucky enough to get some push bands, and man, it is crazy to see kids competing to hit those numbers, like to see their power go up, or to see meters per second just be like going through the roof because they're competing so much. And it's a lot of fun for the kids too, which that's another whole aspect in itself. Is like, yes, we're getting the intensity level to go up, but people are enjoying it too. That's the cool part.
Well, and I hit our kids with a lot of things about like all strength gains are angle and velocity specific. So I'm like, I used to be a diehard, you better get parallel or below, or like, and then I started playing around with this stuff, and I realized our power output, and we still go full squat, but there's times we don't. And what sold me on that, and again, I was as old school as it gets on getting depth. I saw that we would get partial range of motion, and the power output would go up exponentially. And so I'm like, well, I understand that angle specific. Well, so I'm now getting in angle specific positions, moving heavier weight faster than if I did a full squat. So that's been something that's been really big for our program. And I've watched, we've had some kids that their jumps have improved drastically in their time throughout their freshman to senior year. And to see some 5'8" kids dunking, and we had a skinny kid who showed up as a freshman. I never even thought he was an athlete. By the time he graduated, he jumped 6'9" in high jump, and now he's at University of Michigan. And a lot of these tools, I think, have just assisted and helped push the basic stuff that everybody's doing, but just bringing the intensity where we talked about the transfer. I think the intensity coming up has helped the transfer to what they're ultimately trying to accomplish.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about like how the student athletes were taking some ownership in the fundraising process, and then being able to see the equipment that's being purchased and how that's helping them, and this kind of this big cycle or big circle. What is that funding that you're getting for your department? Like how'd you go about doing that fundraising?
Well, it's I've got a problem. My wife would probably tell you the same thing. If I get fixated on something, I won't let it go. And I got here in 2001. Our weight room, we actually have we had a rifle range from the 50s in our school, and that rifle range had been turned into a really skinny 1,800 square foot weight room with some really bad equipment. And I got here, and at one point I was like, why don't we have better stuff? And nobody would give me any money. And so I got challenged by one of our principals at the time, who was an intern, and he said, well, why don't you write grants? And so I was like, all right. So I wrote a couple grants, and a month later, 2 months later, I got one, and it was for like $15,000. And I was like, I couldn't believe anybody gave me $15,000. And then our kids at the same time, they wanted better. They raised, I think at the time we were selling cookie dough. We sold Subway cards. We sold just about anything. And they sold like $8,000 worth of either cookie dough or Subway cards at the time. And then, so we got a nice chunk there, and then another grant came. And at that point, I thought I was like the best grant writer ever. And I think I was just dumb luck. And then they kind of started drying up, and then some more, and then the kids started writing grants, and then we kind of fundraise every year. We started doing a local fundraiser where a local restaurant in our town, they allow us to have 100% profit, and they give us 10 coupons that are buy one, get one free. And they're upper scale restaurants that people like to go to. And last year, I think we brought in $6,000 or $7,000. And this year, I think in a 1 month time, we're already at about 5,000. And so now I'm actually targeting a lot of the money from that to our middle school, because our middle school is kind of in the condition where I first got here at the high school. But that's our programs have donated money to help, like collective groups of teams will give us like $200 to give us seed money and advance off of that. But just basically anybody that will listen and wants to support what we do. And a lot of the parents are very supportive when they see what we're doing, and they'll ask, is there something we can do? And we've gotten money that way too.
That's awesome. That's so many different ways. And I kind of want to know more about this grant writing, man. You must have been an English major, not an exercise science major.
Ironically, that was probably my worst subject. And I always tell people it's more being persevering and just being persistent about it than anything else. But I had some assistance from a few people that have kind of proofread what I've thrown out there, and I think we're close to $150,000 to $170,000 between grants and fundraising in the last now 11 years. And so the district itself didn't give us. The one principal gave me $5,000 the first year to go with all the money we raised. But outside of that and programs giving us money, the district's not giving us money for this stuff. So if we want nice stuff, we need to go out and get it. And we've been able to get some pretty nice stuff. And the funny thing is I've been able to get the stuff I always wanted at the college level that I wasn't able to use, and we have it at the high school. And so our kids are using it, and some of them are going to colleges that have this stuff. And it's pretty neat when they go there and then come back and realize how lucky they were, what they had in high school.
Oh, no doubt. That is so cool, Coach. It's really cool when you're getting all those tools. Athletes are buying in. You're getting people jumping on board. If you got other programs that want to donate your program money, that is a really cool deal. And I just want you to describe maybe a little bit about the culture, kind of what you're trying to get across to your student athletes, to the coaches that you work with, the administrators, your fellow teachers. What is your mission at your school? Well,
it's funny because I'm like, when you leave the college level and you come back working with high schools, I see it happen more times than not where you're used to, like, I've got a basketball program, I got a softball program. I had all the programs. In fact, I stole every program that Jim Cramer wrote. So I've got some really good programs. And so I could give the baseball team, but I got here and I know a lot of coaches that have gone through the same process where you have all these different programs. Well, guess what? My football player plays basketball, and he also plays baseball or track. And so which program are you going to give them? I'm like, and then the beauty of what we do is we train all our kids to just be athletes. So our football players, our basketball players, cross country, it doesn't matter. We're doing the same type of movements. Are you developing more lower body power, flexibility? Are you able to hinge? We improve jumping. It's kind of universal, our distance runners are like our cross country team is probably our most consistent team in our school. And they're our second biggest group in the weight room to football. And they do the same program. Now in the summertime, I have them a little bit different, but during the school year, we work around their meets, but they're still doing their squatting, their hinging. Like it's not different because I don't want to make them have to choose between and put them, because I think a lot of times what happens is we put that athlete between the football coach and the basketball coach and say, who are you going to make upset or who are you going to make happy? And it's just not fair, I think, to the athlete, where the reality is the difference for me to train a basketball player and a football player, there's really not that big a difference. And so that culture of we're all doing the same kind of thing and we're all working to improve our athleticism. And then the cross country kids, they're training for cross country on their own. So I don't touch their running. They're doing that on their own. They'll do the sprinting with me, but they've got the running taken care of. And when I first got here, it was really a mess because I got here and football kind of did a little bit in the fall. Basketball didn't want to lift in the winter because it was basketball season, and then track and baseball didn't want to lift in the spring because it was baseball season. And then we got to the summer and they're at team camps and gone on vacation, and it's only 6 weeks, and we were trying to jam an entire year of training into like 3 weeks, and an inconsistent 3 weeks at that. And so it's been a slow process, but to get football on board and basketball on board and wrestling on board and it's slowly coming where they've all kind of gotten on board with it, and they know we're not going to mess up their games, but we're going to train hard in season. And Bob Alejo has shared a lot of stuff on I think Simply Faster has been an organization that's published a lot of stuff that's actually helped me as a coach. But Bob has talked a lot about in-season high-intensity training and not just going like easy and not easy is not the word I'm looking for. Maintenance. So maintenance means you're losing, and that's the reality of you can't maintain from November all the way to March as a basketball player. You're not even going to be in close to the same kind of shape. And so we try to do a heavy lift at the beginning of the week that doesn't interfere with their games. We sprint with full recovery. We do a moderate lift in the middle of the week. And then at the end of the week, we do a dynamic movement where it's more RFD and high explosion and power. And and if for some reason they have a game that gets switched around, we'll just switch to heavy and the light days. And it's worked really well for us where we track power output and squat jump with gymwear, and our kids are pretty consistently growing over the entire school year instead of seeing a big drop off because they're in season.
That's a big deal. And like with the age of student athletes that we're getting, there should be a rise most of the way. Although, you could almost say all the way through. Maybe there's a little bit of a junior and senior where they're in the middle of, maybe they go from a fall sport right to a winter sport to a spring sport, and they're just like getting hammered because they're playing both ways in football and a ton of minutes in basketball and so on. It's like there's a possibility where it's a struggle in the weight room and it's a struggle to recover. But man, by and large, we should be able to see improvement across our student athletes all the way through. And I think that's awesome that the system that you've got in place.
Especially with the first-time athletes, I always joke, I'm like, some of them have bad work ethic, bad form, bad effort, and they still improve. But once you get through that first initial phase, that doesn't happen. And once you get to a certain level, I always tell them, we might dip a little bit as you get fatigued at the start of basketball or start of track, but our dip is still higher than where you were at the beginning of the year. And that dip is temporary, and then it recovers. And you'll see temporary dips, but the trajectory should have an upward slope with a few dips maybe where, because most games aren't going to be linear, but they are going to have an upward slope, a pretty steady upward slope with very minimal dips.
Yeah. Yes. And it's the toughest thing to do without time, right? Like over time, people can see that, but it's the toughest thing to do to start that thought process, to instill that culture, to get people on board. What was some of the ways that you got that done to say, hey, you know what, across your student body, you said, okay, hey, we are going to lift with intensity. We are going to make sure that we're focused when we're in the weight room. We're going to do this not just when we're out of season, but also in season?
Well, it's actually really funny because coming from the college level, I probably had a better opinion of myself than I actually should have had. And I got here and I thought, okay, everybody's just going to show up. I'm going to be I'm coming from the college. They're going to want to work with me. And I had 4 kids, literally 4 kids the entire summer. And that, not 4 kids on a team, 4 kids. And I was like, I'm like, where is because we live on Lake Michigan. Like, we're in a pretty nice area. And so we're battling Lake Michigan literally across the street. It was a shock to me that I could only get 4 kids, and then trying to get coaches on board. The football coach, he got on board. He was one of the ones that convinced me to come up here. But a lot of the other coaches didn't get on board. And so after a while, I worked with who came. And so I developed whoever would show up. And so what happened is they started seeing results. Other people started coming because they saw those people changing. And like I said, results help for buy-in. So if you can show results with data, if you can show results with testing, people start coming. And it showed up, and people were noticing on the court, certain people were faster, and people were noticing people jumping, and that started drawing more and more. And it kind of started snowballing. It took about 3 years before it really started getting big. And before that, I was before school, after school, so I didn't even have it in the class. And then it started getting a little more and a little more. And next thing you know, we started a class, and the class, we had 2 hours of the class of about 30 kids, which now has grown to 7 hours of anywhere from 40 to 55-ish kids. But again, it took getting the first people on board, and a lot of the coaches they were more old school, where you don't do this during the season. And I was trying to sell it and probably didn't do a great job with it. Where to the convincing part, and finally I said, you know what, just whoever shows up. And it's funny, our track coach he's a Hall of Fame track coach. He's been National Coach of the Year two or three times, and he's been coaching for over 50 years. So he's been at it for a while, and early on he didn't really buy into what we were doing, and he's come full circle where he pushes his kids into our class. Our track teams, we hadn't had sprinters for a while. All of a sudden, we were running times that were competing in the state. Our track team was competing in the state. And so, again, get the results and people will show up.
Big time. That's great. I think you're right. The results are motivators. They're also that stimulus that creates buy-in. Because if we're not providing results, then it's kind of a pointless deal from the very beginning. So any tools that we can have to show that, and then just over the time, just be in the process of developing a student athlete is such a cool deal. You've gone and you've created a program, you've pushed a culture forward. And now it's like one of the things that sometimes we can do is we can look back and see where we've been, but we also have to have a vision for the future. What do you want your program to look like in the next 5 years?
I'd like to get to the point where I don't want to individualize. So I differentiate by ability right now, but I'd also like to differentiate by not just how they lift the weights, but like where they are power. Like, are they deficient in strength? Are they deficient in power? Do they need more speed work? And so the ability to do some of that. I got a grant through Apple. One of my former football players got us where we're going to have 24 iPads in the weight room, and one on every rack, one on every platform. And I'm not there yet, but I'm in the process of between Team Builder and probably Coach Me Plus and looking at the things that will do, because I think that gives me another ability to differentiate the instruction where I can personalize that workout for kids that really like the more advanced kids, and also the beginner kids. Because I'm like, whether you want to call it special education is truly for the top 10 and the bottom 10. So the top 10, they deserve more too. And the bottom 10, they need different things to get them ready. And I think those kind of products, that's really the next step for us. I'm waiting for the iPads to get here, and I'm still watching the market, because I think some really cool things are going to start coming from those with automation, where the data coming from the products that I have will go into those programs and help me make decisions on what type of things my athletes should be doing.
That's awesome. Yeah, no doubt. That's next level stuff. It's one of the cool parts of this podcast. One of the things that I enjoy the most, rather, is just being able to ask people, what are they doing to make the big time where they're at, and I want to hear a little bit more about what that is for you.
For me, it's just giving the athletes what I didn't have. I always thought, I joke with I'm old now. I'm like 46. I know it's not that old, but I feel old. And I'm like, I think I was a better athlete than a lot of the athletes that I'm working with. They're faster than me. They're jumping higher than me. They're more explosive than I ever was. They're stronger than I ever was. So I know for me, I used to just go in the weight room and do whatever as a high school athlete, and even as a college athlete at a D3 level, because we didn't have a strength coach. Which, by the way, Hope College now has a strength coach. So that for me was always, I was learning from people that probably weren't the smartest at times, and that meathead word of mouth, do this, do that, don't squat, it'll make you slow. I remember all these things that people, don't squat, it'll make you slow. But just letting our athletes get the product that will help them be the best version of themselves. And for some, we're getting more kids that are getting opportunities to play after college, and we're just a small part of it, because part of it is they're just really good athletes. But I want to help them maximize what they have. That if their dream is to play Division I volleyball or Division I football or soccer or whatever, I want to give them the tools that will give them the best chance of that. And like I said, I wish I had that when I was growing up, and it's been really fun to watch how I've had parents even come to me, even just in the last month, and talk about how much their son appreciated it, because when they got to college, it was seamless, where they knew how to do these things. There was very little learning for them, and I just think that's really cool.
The fun part of our job, no doubt, is being able to give back, right? For everything maybe that we missed out on, or maybe even if it's just passing it on, or pushing it forward. But man, it's such a fun deal just to be able to see people being impacted, and to also have that come back around, and either parents or student athletes or whatever tell you that. That's such a fun thing, and it kind of reaffirms what you're doing and drives you forward more. So awesome job, Coach.
Thank you.
We're rolling into our finisher questions here pretty soon, and one of the things that I want to do is just give the people the opportunity to know how to reach out to you and stuff. So as soon as we get done with the finisher questions, let's get on and we'll say the best way to contact you also. So you ready for some questions?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, Coach, what's your favorite book?
Well, when I remember, I don't remember which coach it was I was working for, but he told me about Tudor Bompa, and I don't know if anybody even knows who Tudor Bompa is anymore. But I met him at an NSCA conference in like 1996. I heard him speak, and he had a thick accent, but he, like, just listening to him, like I always tell people will say that I'm smart, and I'm like, the difference is I know I'm not really that smart, and I know who is. And right away, I knew that guy was smart. And so he has a book called Periodization Training for Sports. And after seeing him speak, I bought it and I read it cover to cover. And I still go back and like look at things I bookmarked and stolen little bits from it. But Tudor Bompa and some of the philosophies and things, I'm like, they're ingrained into what we do, even if people don't know who he is.
I think the only way that I know who he is, and it's because he brings him up so much, is Joe Ken. Joe Ken references Bompa all the time. Yes. So that's how I've got to know a little bit of his research, a little bit of his work, and a lot of things that Joe Ken quotes anyway. So
and the nice thing is
cool stuff.
He doesn't talk over like this, like that book, for example. Really smart people can make things simple for dumb people like me to understand, and that's how I feel Tudor Bompa is. He doesn't make it so complicated that I can't understand it, and I'm always put off by people that use a lot of big words that I'm like, they don't need to use the big words, and I feel like Tudor Bompa just puts it right where it needs to be.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm gonna have to pick that up because if we get enough people saying, this is the guy that we need to read, which I've heard Joe Ken say it numerous times. He's like, you got to pick up this book, and you're saying it now too. I think it's something that should be in my arsenal. So awesome. How about a person that's influenced you the most? And that can be like strength and conditioning, or it can be just in life in general.
Well, strength and conditioning wise, I'd have to say definitely. It's all the strength coaches I work for, but Jim Crane. When I was an intern, honestly, I wasn't very smart. Like I joke, I probably wouldn't have hired myself, and so Jim Kramer just given me a chance. Like coming from a D3 school and having really no knowledge. And I remember doing the interview, and he made me do some practical stuff, and I know how horrible I was, and he still gave me a chance that got my foot in the door that let me get to the point I am now. Jim Kramer at Northern Iowa he opened my eyes up to different training philosophies and and I probably had the most time on the floor with him. He worked me into the ground. I don't know if I could work what I did back then, but I would be there at 5:15 in the morning, and I would leave at 8 o'clock at night, and I'd get an hour lunch, and that's what we did. And at the time, I wasn't married and didn't have kids, so I loved it. But the majority of the stuff that my kids are getting right now at the high school, it's variations of, not as complicated, but variations of the things that Jim Kramer taught me. And honestly, I didn't learn it in school. I didn't learn it taking the CSCS. I learned a little bit of some of it at the USA weightlifting certification, but really refined it with Jim, and then was able to pair it and kind of take his teaching style and apply it to the kids that I work with. But that would definitely be probably the biggest influence for me as a strength and conditioning coach.
Yeah, man. I think anytime we have mentors that still influence our training today or how we operate, that's awesome stuff. So definitely a big influence there.
Now, how about me as a person? Oh, go ahead.
No, you got it. You as a person.
I would say me as a person. At Hope College, we had a chaplain that came there named Ben Patterson, and it was really for him. He taught me that this isn't who I am. So I know my job isn't who I am. I knew being an athlete wasn't who I am. That who I am in God is more important. And so I think that took a lot of stress off of me at times where I put stress on myself, but like separating the two and making that not as important. So for me, it's that balance. And I think I'm probably lucky I'm not at the college level, because I know as insane as I can be, I could completely dive into strength and conditioning and not look at me as a whole person.
There's so much truth to that, Coach. I had the same or a similar experience within college where I was tying my identity to my performance on the field, and it was something that was a roller coaster of a ride, and not in a good way. And when I found out where my identity truly lied, it's a game changer, and it's such a big deal when people figure that out. So I think that's awesome that you had somebody that spoke into your life like that. How about your favorite quote?
My favorite quote's probably a Brett Bartholomew quote, and it kind of came off of the stuff that I read from Brian Mann, and the same concept: lift weight at different speeds with different loads at different volumes in different ways at different times of the year. Like that, the essence is our strength and conditioning program. We don't do crazy amounts of variety, but that is really how we work with our kids. And there's a time and place for every load. There's a time and place for every speed. There's every range of motion, and then and healthy variations.
Truth. That's awesome. Yeah, I think Brett nailed that quote. And the thing I saw somebody say here recently is like, don't downplay what we do within strength and conditioning. Yes, we push, we pull, we sprint, we jump, we squat, we do those things, but it takes some thought. It takes a good amount of understanding. And I think Brett kind of comes in and says, yeah, it takes a ton of understanding, but truly, if you break it down, simplicity is key, right? And I always fall back on some of the simplest thoughts are the most profound. And I agree exactly with what you're saying, man. How about The last question here, Coach. How about a small school coach who's killing it and deserves a shout out? And by small school, I mean any small college, but then on top of that, every high school in America is how we group that category.
Well, years ago, I listened to a podcast on high school strength coach about a guy named Adam Vogel down in Bradley Bourbonnais, just outside of Chicago, and I'm always learning about things and like man, I wish I could do that. And I started hearing how he was using the GPS. That was when it was like first coming out, and I'm like, this high school guy has it. So my kids are big into soccer right now, and they were back then, and we'd go down and watch Chicago Fire play a soccer game, and I knew he was just so I made an arrangement to go meet with him, and he set up a workout. He showed me how it worked. I mean, I was blown away. I'm like, I can't believe this guy's doing this stuff at the high school level. And to this day, we probably talk once every couple weeks. He's having the same struggles with things that I have, or we're using similar things and how we're using them. And he's a good guy trying to do things the right way, and just putting the best product out there for his kids, and being very creative how he does it.
That's awesome. Definitely going to have to reach out to him and learn more about everything that he implements. That's great stuff, Coach. So we're to the point where I really want to get your contact information out there so people can reach out to you, learn more about the ways that you are implementing some training tools, maybe what it looks like for just your training methodologies, things that you've learned along the way. What is the best way to contact you, Coach?
At email gledo@tcaps.net, or just on my cell phone, 231-631-3731.
Awesome. And we'll put the email and your Twitter in the show notes so people have those links.
Yep.
and can just reach out to you that way too. Coach, I appreciate you coming on, being able to talk through what you're doing, how you're making the big time where you're at. And it's just awesome stuff, Coach, to hear somebody that's so energetic, somebody that's done it for such a good chunk of time and does it with so much passion. That's awesome, Coach.
Well, and I'd like to add, any coaches that are like, this is like, they're struggling to really find where they're going with this. There's large groups of National High School Strength and Conditioning Association coaches all over the country, in almost every state, as far as I know, and getting connected with some of those groups. And there's a lot of good guys that it's not about them, that they're willing to talk and help you and give you advice. And I'd say just reach out to any of those, or even get to one of their conferences. They do a great job with their conferences.
That's sweet, Coach. I would echo that so much. That's how I come in contact with so many people now is just through like the NSCA Facebook page. Obviously become a member, go to clinics, reach out, visit people face to face. That's awesome stuff. But man, there's just so much information that's out there that's shared between high school coaches around the nation. Such an awesome opportunity for growth. So, Coach, once again, thank you for coming on the show. Awesome content. Glad to have you. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you.